Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. For more information, visit korin.com.
This episode is brought to you by Board Bia's Spirit of Ireland program. Please visit irishfoodanddrink.com/Spirit of Ireland to learn more about the rich history and renaissance of Irish spirits.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni, I'm the host. It's our 15th year on Heritage Radio Network. And today we'll be talking about cider season that's coming up and with representatives of 3 different states. It's going to be quite the show. So let's go around the room and you guys introduce yourselves. Start with Ron.
This is Ron Sansone from Middletown, Connecticut, Spoken Spy Cider Works and Cider Institute of North America.
Jonathan.
Hi, this is Jonathan Oakes from Medina, New York, with Minokin Farms, Steampunk Cider, and president of the New York Cider Association.
And Ben?
Ben Wank, Three Springs Fruit Farm and Plowman Cider here in Adams County, Pennsylvania, and current board president of the Pennsylvania Cider Guild.
Scott?
Hey, this is Scott Ramsey, and I'm the executive director for the New York Cider Association, and I'm in Beacon, New York.
Wow. So, September is a harvest season for a lot of people, whether they're doing hops or for some of you, it's apples. I really wanted to get you all together because the different state associations, competitions, state cider fests have really grown and changed a lot in the last 15 years. And I'm really excited to be part of them and to get to know you all better. Scott, why don't you give us a quick intro to what you're planning this year with the New York Cider Association between the festivals and also future themes for promotion? Because I first got involved with cider through the Cider Weeks way back in 2011.
Yes, we're so thrilled to partner with you, Jimmy, on Cider Weeks. Your Cider Feast is always one of the jewels in the crown of our Cider Week Festival. It's always a great time, and this year it's going to be down in Brooklyn again, right? The first Saturday. Our Cider Week is October 5th through Sunday, October 13th. So you're kicking it off for us on that Saturday, October 5th, which is great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we have so much to celebrate this year. I don't know if you've heard, I hope that you have, but our direct-to-consumer shipping legislation, which we have been working on since 2018, if you can believe it, finally got passed and just got signed by the governor. So we're very, very excited about that. This is a huge thing for our cider producers and our growers here in New York State to be able to ship their own ciders directly to their customers, grow their customer base, really help to expand the industry. So we're just super excited about that. So it's a really good time to be celebrating. Our crops are looking good. The ciders are already tasting delicious. So we just have a lot of things planned. I'm certainly, like I said, kicking it off with you and then running through the whole week. And then, even beyond Cider Week, we have a big grand tasting event that we're planning for New York City in Hudson Yards on November 16th. And that is actually the day that the law becomes legal. So we're looking forward to not only celebrating all the great ciders of New York State in one place there in New York City, but also to celebrating the passing of that law. So a lot going on this fall for us here in New York around cider.
Well, it's great to talk to you, Scott. You've really become a great leader for the New York cider community. And thanks for helping organize the show today. So you brought along Jonathan. Jonathan, we met years ago, one of the first cider weeks in New York City. You came down all the way from Western New York, and I was an instant fan of Steampunk. Let's catch up. But tell us about what's going new with you and with the Cider Association.
Yeah, man, it was fantastic to meet you. All those years ago, it seems like a lifetime ago almost. I think we were, you set us up at the table in 49 and we poured for your patrons, which were just fantastic and super excited and interested in what kind of cider we were trying to make up here. For us, we were a 105-year-old farm. We've been into cider. We've been into apples for quite a long time. We've been into cider for since about 2008. with our first release of Steampunk. And we made a strong commitment to try to use cider-specific fruit. So what I mean when I say that is apples that have traditionally high levels of tannin, high levels of bitterness, apples that wouldn't necessarily be for culinary purposes, but mainly for hard cider. They add structure and body and texture, and produce ciders that are often much more interesting than some of the other fare that's out there. But yeah, for us, we've been leaning hard into that. That is our kind of our bread and butter. And it kind of tracks with what's happening with the New York Cider Association as well. The vast majority of our membership are growers as well, not just producers of cider. They are very much impassioned by the location of where they're growing. We have folks from up here in Western New York, all the way to Watertown, all along Lake Ontario, and then all over through the Finger Lakes. Basically anywhere where there's wine down there, there's some cider production. And then all through the Hudson Valley, in some really, old apple communities in those areas, and even out on the Long Island. So the whole state is now producing cider, but with a very strong mind and focus towards growing the product itself, growing the fruit itself, and committing to the whole process, which is really exciting to see. It's exciting for, I know, our growers to have other markets for some of their fruit. And really just strengthens our position here as a state.
Well, Jonathan, the way back in 2014, in the former governor, there was a big New York State cider, wine, beer, and spirits summit in Albany. And I was really privileged to attend that. It was the first time I really got a complete understanding of just how big New York is in terms of being a fruit grower. I mean, whether they're wine or apples, especially in the Niagara region and the Thousand Islands and out western New York. You want to say more about the region that you're from?
Yeah, I mean, in general, New York State is still number 2 as a producer of apples across the country. Washington State still comes in a little bit higher, but mostly for culinary purposes. But where I'm from, I'm about an hour west of Rochester, about 3 miles from Lake Ontario. This side of Rochester tends to produce things, apples that are more for culinary purposes, more grade A, number 1 fruit that goes into supermarkets. And then the other side of Rochester tends to be more for the processing market, motts, applesauce, some juice. But both sides of the state now, or the city, are now pretty rampant in trying to do some cider stuff as well. So we're seeing some preservation of some older varieties like Northern Spy or Rhode Island Greening, which had their day 40, 50 years ago, but there's still some in the ground, and folks are finding some great luck with those varieties again. So it's kind of a resurgence of what's old is new again, maybe repurposed in different ways, but we're very much on the preservation side. We've got about 380 varieties of apples in our U-Pick block, which we try to have folks come in and give a tangible piece of history to take home.
So, Jonathan, for New York history, cider history, what happened in 2008 that your family started to make hard cider?
It actually goes back a little further. So there was Balmers that actually made a push here. They were going to buy up a bunch of trees from a nursery, and they were going to plant some stuff on the East Coast of the U.S. And
so wait, Balmers from was it UK? Or?
UK.
Yeah.
Yep. For whatever reason, they backed out. They had all these trees purchased. And the nurserymen basically said, hey, is there any growers locally that might want to put some of these trees in the ground? And a gentleman who we say is the godfather of cider in New York State, Dr. Ian Merwin, who owns Black Diamond Cidery in the Finger Lakes, was teaching a cider appreciation course around circa 2000, 2001. And he was good friends with my father and taught my father to put some of these trees in the ground. So we actually got a bit of a jump on it in 2001 with some of these varieties in the ground, and didn't really know what the hell we were going to do with them.
What varieties were those?
That was, let's see, we got brown snouts, Medaille d'Or, Michelin, Chisel Jersey, Dabinet. A lot of them bittersweet varieties, hailing mainly from England. And they've done really good to provide us with a backbone of what steampunk is today.
Well, I love steampunk. I remember it right away. It was very drinkable, but also kind of thing I could keep going back to. And so it was definitely one of those ciders that got me hooked. For you guys now, from then to now, you always hear about cider people are talking about varieties, but in terms of consumers, how important are there different, traditional varieties to consumers, and how much in the Cider Week, Cider Association marketing is focused on educating consumers about the different varieties of apples? Or is it more about dryness scales? What areas are you guys focusing on to get more consumers into the product?
Well, there needs to be broad scale education about cider as a category. It is very versatile. We have all types of cider, from more adjunct heavy ciders to fruited ciders, sour ciders, hop ciders, herbal ciders, and then we have varietal specific ciders. The cider game is we always run a risk of trying to pigeonhole ourselves and back ourselves into a corner. And I think we'd do best to take a lesson from the wine industry and talk about the diversity of cider without putting on a certain level of pretension or saying that cider has to be made from certain varieties. We have all gradations of quality. We have all gradations of different styles and structure, and I think we need to celebrate that. And the education piece is huge. We have partnered a lot with the American Cider Association. They now have some very definitive categories. We amplify those messages through our New York Cider Association as well. And just more education on the diversity and genetic diversity of apples. There's just, it's limitless. It really is. There's so much potential when it comes to apples that I think it can go much further beyond where the wine world tends to go when it thinks of we need to have, say, one variety in one place. I think we can all do a little bit more broad scale, more diverse approaches to this.
Yeah. Well, that's a great intro, Jonathan. We're going to keep going deeper with you guys. Let's jump over to Pennsylvania. So, Ben, it's great to have you on. Last month we were talking with Eric West about some cider competitions, and that's how I got introduced to you. Tell us about Pennsylvania, and I know you have a cider competition that goes on there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have pretty good apple and cider culture here in Pennsylvania. We're the fourth largest apple producing state. And we've been holding our competition through a partnership with the Pennsylvania Farm Show. The PA Farm Show, honestly, is kind of the de facto state fair here in Pennsylvania. Happens early on in January every year, and attracts some pretty large crowds. I think the biggest crowd they have was over 800,000 people over an 8-day period. So it's really well attended. And so we work with the Farm Show to bring in some great judges. And I believe we've been holding that competition since about 2017. We have one of our regular judges, Ron Sansome, here on the panel with us today on the pod, which is really great. Ron's been awesome in getting our cider competition going and maintaining a high level of judge for our competition. But that allows us to participate in the Farm Show and invites a number of producers from across our state to enter. And we award the Secretary's Cup to the winner every year. And we have several categories we're judging our ciders in. But similar to what Jonathan was saying, a lot of this competition, a lot of what we do with sampling and selling at the PA Farm Show is all designed to really interact with the public and do a lot of consumer education. Cider is still a beverage for which there's a lot of miseducation or maybe lack of education. So an opportunity to interact with that many people over an 8-day period of time is really important for us. And And obviously being able to sell cider at that function is a really nice fit for our producers in January when sales tend to slow down a little bit traditionally in the cider industry. So, the competition has been a really great thing for us, and we continue to see an increased participation year upon year, and looking forward to getting those entries in sometime in November, and then I believe adjudication occurs in December. We're hoping Ron will be able to join us again. He should be hearing from the folks at the farm show here soon, but it's been a really fun thing to be involved with.
Ben, tell us a little bit more about, is there something unique about the history of apples and cider in Pennsylvania, and particularly about the place that you work?
Sure. So, Pennsylvania has been a big apple producer for a long time. Kind of by tradition, it started out as a very heavily processed apple state, similar to what was described by Jonathan in Western New York there around Mott's. We have Nous Foods here in Pennsylvania, which makes products under the Lucky Leaf and Musselman's brands, which are commonly found in grocery stores and whatnot, pie filling, applesauce, those kinds of things. So that's been kind of the bread and butter of the apple industry for a long time. But more recently, I'd say the last 20, 25 years, we've seen a lot of our producers switching over to a little bit more fresh fruit, a little bit more packed apples, which would go to grocery stores, primarily through Rice Fruit Company. If you see those Rice Fruit Company apples in your grocery store, they're likely coming from Pennsylvania. So that's become a more significant part of our industry as we continue to transition. And obviously cider as well. We have over 70 different operations that are making cider in Pennsylvania. I know we could certainly talk about the legislation and the laws around cider and how it differs from state to state. And certainly having New York represented here, they kind of have the gold standard in legislation as far as their farm cidery license. It's really the envy of all the surrounding states. And we look upon that as a real goal that someday maybe we could have something similar to that. But in Pennsylvania, you can produce cider with a winery license or a brewery license. So it does really open things up in terms of who's able to produce cider in Pennsylvania. We continue to see new producers come online, continuing to add more members to our PA Cider Guild as well. And we really think that cider is a really great option for a lot of our orchards going forward as the transition from processing to fresh market is occurring. We find that there's this new niche for processing apples into alcoholic cider, and we're hopeful that that's a trend that will continue to grow in Pennsylvania.
Ben, you mentioned legislation in Pennsylvania. So what do you mean by that? I mean, are you guys able to have tasting rooms? Are you able to sell direct to consumers? How do you sell your cider?
Sure. So speaking specifically of Plowman, we sell to bars and restaurants. We have a tap room space of our own in the square of Gettysburg. We do participate in direct-to-consumer shipping through Vino Shipper, which is a common third-party partner for cideries like ours to ship even into other states direct-to-consumer. The nice thing about the laws in Pennsylvania that I'm not sure a lot of certainly, again, New York is kind of the gold standard, but many states don't have the ability to sell other alcohol that's produced in Pennsylvania. At least in our state, we can serve anything on premise that is produced in Pennsylvania. So that's a recent change in the legislature that has benefited our small producers. But this is a lot of these changes have only occurred in the last 5 or 6 years. I know our PA Cider Guild was involved in, at the beginning of the guild, we weren't even allowed to sell any cider through the 3-tier distribution network. We were able to get that legislation changed. We got cider defined in the liquor code, which didn't exist until I think 2017 or so. So change has been coming slowly to Pennsylvania, but it has been slowly but surely modernizing a little bit for the benefit of our producers and the consumers here in Pennsylvania as well.
Well, Ben, that's a great intro. I want to go to Ron. This is like what I imagine one day doing for an election night show, talking to people in different states, but I'd rather talk about cider. So Ron, there you are up in Connecticut. What's it like there?
I mean, it's great. I like Connecticut, and I like the cider people here. I don't think we're quite as big as New York or Pennsylvania. We're kind of, hoping to catch up a little. But, there are new cideries every year. None are closing, so that's a good thing. We distribute to bars, restaurants, breweries. We do have the ability to sell other alcohol made in Connecticut if we get like an add-on permit for our tasting room. So a lot of the cidery tasting rooms now offer beer and spirits, cocktails, things like that. So, I think we're catching up, but, New York and Pennsylvania will always be ahead. As far as apples here, the season's great this year. Everything's looking good. The end of the year, cider season, October, November, December, it's already kind of ramping up to be crazy. So something to look forward to. And we are having a cider festival in November, kind of central Connecticut, November 23rd.
Where's the location?
It's in Ansonia, Connecticut.
Where's that?
It's kind of in the middle of Connecticut, central to like all the counties. It's Ansonia.
It sounds like a colonial thing. Got to be not favor anybody. So also for you guys, for Connecticut, and when I also know you from being all things cider, and you're a judge and you're Cider Institute. It does seem like that in almost every state didn't have cider as an alcoholic beverage defined. Is that the case?
Yeah, in Connecticut, there were a lot of different permits and a lot of different things you could do. And I think after COVID, things have been kind of refocused, and now there are fewer permits. And I can make wine, mead, or cider with the same permit. So it's a little different here.
Yeah. And Scott, I know you're there representing the state. You've been to CiderCon. What any states you want to call out or questions for these other guys?
No, I'm just impressed to hear, it's at CiderCon, we have a guild leaders meeting. And so there's always representatives from across the country that are sort of leading the charge for each of their states. And it's always just so exciting and amazing to hear all the different things that are happening. Like I love everything that Ben's sharing about what's happening in his area, and Ron as well. It's a great time for cider. It's, CiderCon is always a very inspiring time, and it's great to be connected now tonight to be talking about everything we're looking forward to for the fall season.
Yeah. What are some questions that people state by state are talking about that I haven't asked about?
From my perspective, the direct-to-consumer piece comes up. One of the things we talk about sort of at the guild sort of leaders level is just how to be more connected to our members. How do we better support the folks that we're here for? And, what I find so interesting about this particular group of folks is that, these are not people who are at their desks or readily, checking their email. These are folks who are literally like growing apples, producing cider, making cider out in their fields, out in their orchards, in their tasting rooms. So there is a challenge in trying to make sure when you're trying to collectively get information out to this group or, help them and support them and get them the support that they need, it can be a little tricky. So we're always talking sort of at the, national level and the state level about how to be better connected to our members. And that's always a big topic of conversation as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ben, how long has there been the Pennsylvania organization? Tell us more about what work you guys are doing in that regard.
Sure. Our Cider Guild dates back to 2015, and it was formed to kind of solve a very specific kind of quasi-legal situation that was having some of our grower-producer members essentially paying two marketing assessments on the same fruit, one to the wine industry and one to the apple industry, at which time neither of those organizations were doing anything with that money to promote alcoholic cider. So that's kind of the origin story and how far we've come as an industry and as a guild in Pennsylvania in a relatively short amount of time. And you think it's been less than 10 years that the guild's been around. And we started from that kind of kind of absurd issue into where we're at today. So yeah, very much started by a bunch of concerned fruit growers who are also entering the alcoholic cider industry. We've grown steadily over time. We've had a few legislative victories, a few legislative defeats. We were able to start a really fun event in 2016, the Pennsylvania Cider Fest, which was organized by Mary Bigham and Rich Ashenfelder, the founders of PA Cider Fest, which is an event that we were very proud to revive this year in 2024 for the first time since 2019. That's been really important. We've also had a pretty steady drumbeat of promotions in Philadelphia, and we're looking forward to Philly Cider Week at the end of October, which I guess I should mention is also part of National Cider Month, which is a new campaign that's being launched. So yeah, we have cider producers from all corners of Pennsylvania. We have, a really good cohesive kind of grassroots organization at the Cider Guild. Tackling everything from, consumer education to events, promotions, legislation, and kind of banking off what Scott said. It's for a category that's so small like cider. Not only are, the same people that are making the ciders in a lot of cases growing their own apples and, also fixing their own tractors and doing, all their own handiwork and doing all that, but we also are our own advocates at the same time. Folks, this is not unique to Pennsylvania, but I think in cider in general, we're kind of forced to wear many hats and fill many roles because we're a very small grassroots kind of category within the beverage industry. And it creates a large demand in our time. And but I've also found that the people that get involved in cider only get into it because they really love it and they're passionate about it because the other part of that is many of us have second jobs while we're doing all the cider things. So it's a really great community, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. And I'll also, throw in a shout out, as Jonathan did, to the ACA, the American Cider Association, which does such a great job of keeping, all of our cideries across these United States, cohesive together, working together to a common goal. And it's a really fun industry to be involved in.
It's cool. This does sound like election night. Thanks, Ben.
It's a big tent. We're forming a big coalition here, Jimmy.
I like that. But on that note, Jonathan mentioned the guy from Black Diamond, introducing his family to some of these, heirloom cider trees. How did you or some of the other cideries that how did they learn to make cider? Because, there was prohibition and kind of this art was lost. I mean, is there someone going around Pennsylvania showing people how to make good cider?
Well, really at the moment, no. I think that a lot of us started, I was certainly speaking for myself and a few of the other producers I know in Pennsylvania, we started as home enthusiasts. Like the origin story for us was as simple as we just started doing farmers markets back in 2007 when I came back from college. And along with that, we were getting our cider custom made into our own fresh cider with UV treatment pasteurization. And I was told that, I only had like 2 trips or 14 days to sell this stuff. And I'd never sold cider anywhere before. And so I was trying to calibrate exactly how much to make each week. And some weeks I ended up with a whole bunch and it was starting to create some waste. I said, well, wait, isn't there a way to make alcohol out of this stuff? Why did I curb my waste by, again, I'm right out of college, right? So I'm like thinking of a way, how can I turn this into a drink that my friends and I can enjoy? And then, at the end of the day and whatnot, and started making it as a very passionate, large scale home cider maker. And eventually, this obviously is something that is very much in Ron's interest and his leadership at Cider Institute. Was able to take the practices and principles of cider making course with Peter Mitchell at Cornell in Geneva very early on into my home cider making journey, and certainly picked up a lot of information through that. I've read a lot of books. Gone to a lot of cider cons, which is always fun. Been to Franklin County Cider Days up in Western Massachusetts, which is a really lovely event. So a lot of it is networking, great organizations like the Cider Institute of North America, incredible teachers like Peter Mitchell, who I was fortunate enough to study with. And then Penn State did have some great seminars, including some with Ian Merwin, whose name keeps coming up. So I've been very fortunate to receive some of that education here within Pennsylvania as well. So, yeah, we do have some programming through Penn State Extension, which has been helpful. I've taken some trips with Penn State to England and learned from producers like that, and down to Virginia and up into New York. So a lot of travel and a lot of going out of your way to educate yourself and doing some travel. Those are great ways to learn this craft over time.
That's cool. I remember way back when I was in college, people figured out they could make mead just from like an old Grolsch bottle and something and honey. Did you ever make cider like that? Just so simple, just like a little carboy or something. So you were starting out.
Oh yeah, no, Jimmy, my earliest entrees into making cider were 100% by neglect. I had enough of this waste product that I found I could buy some used bourbon barrels that were Jack Daniel's barrels down in Frederick, Maryland. I went down with my pickup truck and hauled 3 barrels back. And the only person I could find around the area that had done anything with cider was this old timer who told me to put a pound of sugar for every gallon into this barrel. So I didn't know what chaptalization was, but I was certainly doing it and ending up with ciders that were registering at 17, 18%. Boy, I didn't know what I was doing to get started, but I was definitely doing it the easy way. It was like Ron Popeil out there, set it and forget it. I was just throwing in the yeast, throwing in the sugar, putting an airlock on and walking away for a year. And it, again, you learn from experiences like that and eventually kind of refine my methods. But that was the very crude origins of my cider making journey. Not quite at the bottle of Grolsch flipper bottle at a time, but, just as somewhat haphazard as what that sounds is kind of what I was doing on a much larger scale, I guess.
In Pennsylvania, are there old time farmers that talk about the old ways, like, what you just talked about, putting the juice in a barrel, maybe with raisins or something else?
Yeah, we have a lot of great hand-me-down agricultural history from previous generations. I've learned a lot about, some of the old, and I've been back on the farm from college long enough that a lot of these quote unquote old wise tales, that the old timers would say about planting by the sign, or, if there's fog on the hill, you'll get your fill, and all these little antiquated sayings. They've all proven themselves true over the years. But in an interesting way, even for, and Gettysburg is the seat of our county. The county seat is historic Gettysburg in the south part of Adams County. So a very historic area, but there has really been very little written history around cider making, even though our apple industry here is 150 years old. So I guess the short answer is I could find very few people to teach me anything about cider, but I suspect it was happening all along, but no one was willing to say anything about it or write anything about it. Very, kind of hush German stock around here in Adams County. But I'm certain it was happening in a lot of basements and a lot of root cellars and barns and whatnot. But I never really caught any wind of it, and I've been looking through our county historical preservation society. I'm seeing very little written evidence of it, but I'm still looking because I know that there's got to be some history around here, but it's been mostly concealed, I believe.
Jonathan, for you out in Western New York, we've heard a lot about heirloom apples, and I know people are still learning about them, planting them. But do people talk about old methods of fermenting cider?
Oh yeah, not so much a methodology as kind of similar to what Ben says. You set it and forget it kind of mentality of, oh well, yeah, take a barrel, throw it in a horse barn, stuff a fifth of Jack in there, kill off all the indigenous bad bacteria and yeast, and then eventually you throw some sugar in there, and eventually it'll take off. I've heard that from several old timers around here, just anecdotally popping in. When I first got into this, I started fermenting in the basement of my grandma's house about 2003. And we were running a cider mill here, and I'd have guys that would bring me barrels all the time that It was a changeover of generations. They said that this is the way their grandfather had done it, and this is the way they wanted to continue doing it. We have a little bit of a storied history here along this area. Runs right through our back orchard. Here is the old Hojack railroad line. And there were a lot of folks that would come in riding off that railroad line that would be, stop in and do labor for a day, get paid in hard cider. The phrase was a drunk worker was a happy worker. And it rang true for quite a while. There were a lot of packing houses that have now, established themselves along that line. And even before that, the Erie Canal, which runs through our next town south of us, a lot of apples were floated down that canal and down to New York City.
Scott, as you guys talk about celebrating cider in New York State, how much of the history are you talking about?
In what way do you mean, Jimmy?
I don't know.
Well, Jonathan, we have one of the best cider makers in New York State, as far as I'm concerned, on the call with us. So it's great to have Jonathan online so he can chime in here. But, much like certainly from an association perspective, our New York Cider Association was also formed in 2015. So we're looking forward to 10 years next year. And we talk about in just that short amount of time from a handful of cider makers back in 2015 to now over 125 licensed producers in New York State. That's an industry growth of over 2,400%. And, I'm really closely associated now with a lot of folks in our New York State agricultural markets offices. We've become good friends and good partners. And, I challenge them a lot to show me any other agricultural industry in this state that's had that kind of growth over the last 10 years. It's very exciting. We are, as Jonathan also said, the second largest apple growing state. Some of the most popular cider varieties were actually started here in New York State. So we use those as talking points, but we're also really proud of that because, we really believe obviously in this industry, and it's exciting to be in a place where, so much comes together around cider and so much of the story is here. So, that's my perspective. Jonathan, anything else to add around the history of cider in New York State?
Just what a treasure the Hudson Valley is for New York cider. The various forts that were in and around the Hudson that were hard cider was a staple of the fort of the folks that were moving in and up and down the river. There's a few apples here that are just iconic New York apples. One that comes to mind is Newtown Pippin. We are very, very fortunate to have Cornell in our backyard here as an institution to help foster horticulture. Ben mentioned Peter Mitchell already. Yeah, I studied under Peter Mitchell as well. He's kind of the grandfather of a lot of the East Coast basic early knowledge of cider making from the late 90s to almost present day.
Is he Peter Mitchell from England?
Yep. The UK came over. He taught up at Cornell. He did like a 2-day course where you can go and you can just ignite your passion, learn a little bit of the basics and the chemistry and the fermentation. And now they've since, I think he's just retiring, deciding he's pretty much done with it. And I don't know who's going to backfill that role, but it was great to see something like that as a very concise introduction and really get people started down that path.
I think one reason I asked the question about the history, and it was a broad question, is because when I think about beer, and I just did a show about hops, fresh hops, you go to places like in Cooperstown, there's the National Farm Museum, and they still have a kind of an example of what a hop yard is and a hop drying house. I just wonder if that is part of this New York marketing, or if it's specific to certain orchards, if they have replicas of old presses, for example, and the romance of making cider.
Mm-hmm. You know, a great you're making me think, Jimmy, of Elizabeth Ryan from Hudson Valley Farmhouse Ciders here in the Hudson Valley. She is that sort of OG person to talk to here in New York State. She's been an apple grower for decades, graduated from Cornell as well. And Jonathan mentioned, you know, we're so fortunate to have Cornell here in our state, which is a fantastic partner. But she's got those kinds of things. She also has some really fantastic maps, topographical maps of the state, and you know, the really great story that we also have here around terroir and all of our you know, glacial, you know, formed lakes up in the Finger Lakes region and the Hudson Valley, and what that has done for our soil here to grow these amazing apples that produce this incredible cider. She has those things. She's got some ladders back from the old days, some presses, and all kinds of interesting things. If you visit her at Stone Ridge Orchard, she's a great person to talk to. And should you enter into conversation with her about the topic, just be prepared to buckle in, because she can go on and in a really fantastic way. And I know you know Liz, so she's just a great person to also have here in the state and in the region, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I think as much of the history of the apple trees, there's lore, there's romance, especially when you're drinking. You know, it's nice to think that you're doing something that many others have done for centuries or more. Ron, I didn't get to ask you, just where are we going? Steer the ship here.
Where are we going? You guys were talking about all the history and everything, and I know Pennsylvania has an apple museum that I've never been to, and I wanted to ask Ben, what is that? Is it a cider? Is there cider involvement, or is it just apples?
Sure. So that's the National Apple Museum in Biglerville, Pennsylvania. We are really proud to partner with the Apple Museum in a number of ways. On the Plowman side of things, that is, we hold our annual anniversary party, Cidernalia, there every year. We have a summer concert series there. So they have an event space and a stage that we take advantage of, and they're just lovely people to work with and a big part of the community there in Biglerville. And yeah, the Apple Museum is, you know, very much kind of a history of, in a lot of ways, the Adams County apple history, especially around processing apples. So it's a great source for, you know, historic peeler machines and slicing coring machines, you know, kind of old packaging materials. A lot of great history there. They maintain a library of you know, informational sources and historic texts about apples, so you can go there and do all of your apple research. Yeah, it's open weekends, seasonally, and by appointment. It's a really fun place to visit. They keep making improvements every year. They'll definitely be open during the National Apple Harvest Festival, which is a big thing for our community down here. That's held the first 2 weekends of October every year, and that's a great time to visit our county and the Apple Museum as well. And like I said, it's actually kind of, a lot of ways, turning into a little bit of a DIY music venue, in addition to having the upstairs part. And the upstairs, it's actually a Pennsylvania bank barn, so kind of a little bit of a concert hall in the downstairs part, and up in the upper level of the barn is where the museum proper is held. And there's always volunteers there happy to give you a tour around. And yeah, it's a really fun thing to check out. My favorite thing up there is there's a trunk of, I believe it's a Spitzenberg tree, a cross section of a 100-year-old Spitzenberg apple tree trunk that was from our buddies at Freycon's farm. So that would probably be Steve and Hank's great-great-grandfather probably planted that tree over in Berks County, you know, way back at the turn of the century. And that's a pretty cool cross-section of an apple tree that's 100 years old. So there's all kinds of little nuggets like that are fun to check out at the National Apple Museum.
Well, that's pretty neat. Jonathan?
Yeah, Jimmy, I just want to chime in and say, give a shout out to one of my good friends, Dan Pucci. Used to run with Sale down in New York City. He has written a book called American Cider. If anybody is really interested in digging into the history of cider across the country, that's the first bit of collected knowledge that I've seen that tries to tries to capture what we're all talking about in a more broad sense of what was happening across the whole country.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have the book, and Dan did come on when it came out, and it is quite amazing. I mean, we went down to parts of Virginia and the Southwest, as well as, you know, New England and New York, and it really is the first book like that I've ever seen.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korin is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant, from French to Pan-Asian to American. And that is why they're located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korin's Tribeca showroom is home to the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan. Stop by to view their exquisitely designed tableware and the rarest natural sharpening stones. They have a whole range of knife services, from repair and rust removal to reshaping and realigning. Korin is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the highest quality Japanese design to your table so you can experience the unparalleled quality of Japanese craftsmanship in your home or restaurant. For more information, visit Korin.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Greg Benson.
I'm Souther Teague.
And this is Damon Bolte from The Speakeasy. And we're excited to share our latest episode with you, especially if you're passionate about the craft and culture of Irish spirits. This week, we had the pleasure of exploring the dynamic world of Irish spirits with three exceptional guests.
Yeah, Andy Ferreira from Cask joined us to discuss the evolution of the modern Irish on-premise and mixology scene. We also spoke with Tim Herlihy about the success of Lost Irish here in the United States. And finally, Dara Flanagan from Board Bia gave us some fascinating insights into what lies ahead for Irish spirits in the United States.
Exactly. So if you are curious about the heritage and future of Irish spirits, this episode is for you. And to deepen your understanding, we totally recommend exploring the Spirit of Ireland program. It's really cool. It's a comprehensive look at the rich history and renaissance of Irish spirits, featuring interviews with master distillers, barrel coopers, and a lot more. It even offers a sensory journey through the barley fields and barrel houses of Ireland, which is super cool.
Totally. So for those who want to dive deeper into the world of Irish spirits after listening to our latest episode, the Spirit of Ireland program offers an educational journey that goes way beyond the glass, taking you into the heart of Irish spirit making with stories, traditions, and a lot of innovations. Please visit irishfoodanddrink.com/Spirit of Ireland to learn more and find our latest episode wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Back to New York State in particular, because I know a lot's changing, evolving, especially since Scott's been around. But, you know, the early days of the association, Jonathan, were you guys working more towards a model of what New York Cider does or breweries? I mean, I know that you guys, they started out with the Cider Weeks. Let's talk about how Cider Weeks evolved. Then in the pandemic, it seemed that the cider trails were more of the promotional lead.
Yeah, it really, the entirety of the organization kind of spawned out of a group called Glenwood, which is just up in Cold Spring, out of the city, about an hour and a half. And they're a center for regional farming and really trying to bring back and help to build culture around food and beverage. And so they originally pulled together a bunch of growers and a bunch of kind of nascent cider makers that were starting to make things happen, and invited a lot of folks out. We had folks that were from all the way Chicago area, and then all over the state, all over the basically the Northeast. And kind of what came out of that was the beginning phases of conversation of like, well, how do we organize to better serve the growing trends that were happening, better to serve the folks that were trying to make this work, the producers. And a lot of us New York folks really started to pull together. And Glenwood kind of set the beginning stages and the framework of trying to help us form an organization. And through that, and through some very impassioned folks that really wanted to kind of coalesce and work together. That's how the organization was formed. It was really kind of neat to be in those first few years of just, piecing together what we had all been individually working upon, and seeing how we could impact each other and we could grow something together. And that. Yeah.
I thought the early cider week was really cool. It's, I was a restaurant owner in New York City. That's how I got to know some cider makers, and between Cider Week and what Dan Pucci was doing at Wassail, I mean, I met some English cider makers. I met West Coast cider makers. I met people from Asturias in Spain. It's quite amazing. So what I know there was a big push for the cider trails. You want to talk about that? Because I feel like it really shows how the New York cider industry has kept evolving in a good way.
For us, up in our neck of the woods, we didn't really see a cider trail pop up. The Finger Lakes was pushing to have some cider trail stuff happen, as well as the Hudson Valley. And what really came out of those were kind of individual marketing endeavors for those particular regions. But really what coalesced is the formation of the Cider Association, and then a kind of a more broad scale focus of the state. And now we've even gone back to really, we built an app. We now have New York Cider is the app. You can go on there, you can find it wherever you get your apps. And that basically has every cidery in the state that's a part of our membership. And allows you now to build out your trails and your destinations around cider in all the regions in New York State. And that coincides with our New York Cider mark, or our mark designation that is now you'll be finding on packaging all across the state from our members, and that guarantees that it's 100% made with 100% New York State apples.
That's amazing. I've seen that recently. Who pushed for that? I mean, it's a big step forward.
It's a big step and it's a big statement. And collectively, our membership, we've all pushed that. It really has been, Scott, you can chime in here, but I think it's been 6 years or so we've been trying to push this forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it existed before my time here, and I started in 2020. So it's been several years that it's taken to sort of really get together, get the branding of it right, get the theory behind it right, and we did finally roll it out this year. So it's really exciting to see that it's fully out and alive, and people are using it. And as Jonathan said, it's, when you see that mark, it means that it's made with 100% New York State apples, and it is a 100% New York State agricultural product. So we're excited to be evolving the brand of New York Cider. It's been a long road, but it's out there and it's alive.
So, doing something like that, it also involves everybody updating their labels, right?
It does. So some people have already, by the time we put it out, we shared it at our annual membership meeting back in March. And by that time, people had run a lot of their labels. So I think over the course of the next year is when you'll really start to see it a lot more, when people are running new labels for the new seasons.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, just going back to history. I know that you've been making cider with an old orchard in Rhode Island with a cool history.
Yep, that was I connected with a guy with an orchard that was previously owned by Benedict Arnold. It's on his property, and it's a pretty cool little cider project called Turncoat. We do 3 different ciders now. One's more American style, one's British style, and one is barrel aged. The previous batches we did Madeira barrels. This year around, we're going to do bourbon barrels.
Yeah, but that's a good example of trying to tie history to making a good bottle of cider, right?
Yeah. It's he grows great food. It's a beautiful orchard right on the ocean, just outside of Newport there, surrounded by the ocean. He calls it a saltwater orchard. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah,
it's a very beautiful place.
Hey Scott, you want to tell us more about it is, we're not really a news show, but it's definitely big news. The direct to consumer law in New York State, which is for everything, right? It's for spirits as well as cider.
Yeah, so this particular bill that got passed is specific to spirits, small craft producers of spirits, and to cider in New York State. And Ron, Jimmy, it has been an incredible journey. I tell people it's like I was living in a Schoolhouse Rock episode to watch this thing progress. I mean, I've never experienced anything like it. It was a 24-hour day, staying in touch with folks, like making sure people had talking points, making sure people understood the necessity for this for our producers in New York State. We had a bill that was specific just to cider that started back in 2018. And we tried for years, obviously, to get that passed, which it clearly never did. And then out of the pandemic, another bill came out that was the spirits and cider bill. So, it was a much more difficult push, quite frankly, because spirits was involved. So that becomes a little bit more of a broader conversation and a bigger conversation. But at the end of the day, our perspective is that cider is an agricultural product. This is about supporting farmers in New York State and growers in New York State. And it's been really exciting to me personally to see at the legislative level here in the state. And quite frankly, we were having some conversations at the federal level as well to help people understand, where they could support. But people really are now, I hear the word agriculture and I hear the word farming and, I hear the word grower as they talk about cider as well. And that, I have to say, more than anything, is probably one of the biggest gifts of the whole entire process, is that to really see people understand the value that cider brings to the state and to our economies, and that they consider it, they really understand the value of it to our agricultural landscape, and they consider it a really strong agricultural product, which is something we've been trying to get them to understand for years. So it was a fascinating process like nothing I've ever experienced. And, we were just so thrilled. We recently got to go, Jonathan and I, to the state fair, and the governor was there, and we had a big moment where we had a big toast. So there's been a lot of fun fanfare around it as well. But now the real work begins, because now we need to make sure, certainly from my perspective as an association, that we're helping our members understand what this means for them and how it can potentially help their business, or what their options are as far as, opening up that channel of business for themselves that they haven't been able to do before.
Jonathan, how do you see it, enacting this and helping, your business?
Well, I mean, so we are both a winery and a cidery up here, and we've been able to direct ship wine since the 90s in New York State. And it's always kind of been, frustrating, head scratching as to why in the hell we can't, produce cider and ship it directly to our consumers the same way we can wine. And really, this whole bill has been about parity, as the biggest agricultural crop in the state. Something that's, we've proven that the money that would come in terms of tax revenue, we've proven that on the wine side, that it's worthwhile investing in your agriculture and your agricultural.
Wait, so Jonathan, so direct consumer is you can ship wine, cider in New York State, and it's not just about being able to go to your. It's separate from being able to go.
Correct.
Your cidery and buy the product. It's about
up to this point, you couldn't have somebody come into your tasting room that would live in New York State and ship cider directly to them, or spirits, or mead. This direct consumer bill now allows you to do that to both in state and to others out of state. So the wine had always had that. That was through the 90s when that got passed, coming out of the Farm Bill. And so it really, for us to get that parity was huge. So now that kind of puts us on a level playing field here with a lot of the tourism that's centered around beverage in New York State.
And how does it work shipping to other states? Do there have to be agreements in place?
So, much like what Ben was describing before, a lot of folks use Vino Shipper. Basically, each state has to hold their own. There has to be a different licensing that allows you to ship into those states, and a different taxation for the products that you ship into those states. So each individual producer would have to basically pay whatever licensing fee and then follow up on how much they shipped and pay the tax on what each individual state decides is proper taxation. So an organization like Vino Shipper or Ship Compliant, a couple big companies that work to hold those licenses, pay those taxes, and basically you pay a flat percentage fee to this company to then handle the all the paperwork in terms of those things. So it allows you to ship into other states that, for little guys, that's everything, where we couldn't afford to do that in such a broad scale, like some other larger corporate companies.
Well, it's a huge win for you guys.
It's a huge one.
Yeah. So I could call you up and you can send me a case of cider in New York City or in Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. Why don't we do this? Let's each of you think of a question for someone else, because I know there's four of you and we're going to wind down. Who wants to start? Because I love when the guests ask questions of others.
Yeah, I'll start. Jimmy, this is Scott. So Ben, I'm curious to know more I'm excited for Philly Cider Week. That seems pretty fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. So that's something that I believe the first event was Halloween of 2017, and it kind of turned into a week-long promotion all across Philadelphia the following year, and has continued on, obviously with a pause for COVID considerations. But yeah, it's a great way to engage with consumers in at least the largest volume cider market in our state. Philadelphia has been certainly a great market for our company, Plowman Cider, in addition to so many cideries in Pennsylvania take advantage of the great population of cider drinkers in Philadelphia. And so it's taken on this particular year is going to be co-managed by our Cider Guild. So it's taking on kind of a new chapter starting with this 2024 year. And yeah, very simply, we try to allow each cidery to program the events that they think are most beneficial to their brand and their company. But it's always a really good blend of educational things, cider dinners that are, showcasing the great ways that cider and food can be paired together, to, just really big fun parties that engage with people and make really good experiences around our favorite beverage. So we're really, really excited to look forward to another year of programming. It's always the last week of October. Again, it does coincide with this new national push for National Cider Month, October, which is all across the United States. And there's a lot of New York producers I saw that are participating in that as well. So yeah, really exciting thing to be involved in, and it'll be here before we know it. It's a lot to handle harvest season and all the promotions, but as all my other cider producers will certainly agree with me, it's also nice to be asked to do something. So yes. We kind of we feel the pressure of doing all the harvest work and all the events, because that's when people are focused on cider, and we really do have to capitalize on when we have the most eyes on us, for sure.
I completely understand what you're saying. We have that conversation, I think, every year, Jonathan and I on the board, around, it's October. Is this really the time to be asking our folks to, do one more thing, because they're already so busy, certainly with harvest and in their tasting rooms. And but it is such an opportunity, especially when you think about a consumer education perspective. Like, this is the chance to grab people's attention. They're focused on it. And it's always great to elevate during that time period. I'm excited. I want to try to get down for some of the events.
Oh, we'd love to have you. Just shoot us a line. We'll keep you updated, and folks can find all that information on the website, phillyciderweek.com. We're just now starting to upload events. We just sent information out to all of our producers, so that website should be populating with all kinds of fun events to fill your calendar at the end of October. If you're in the Philadelphia area, or if you feel like making a little trip, there's going to be plenty to do for cider enthusiasts in the city of brotherly love here at the end of next month.
Guys, I remember, Philly led with Beer Week before New York ever had. And I know you guys have a lot of great traditions there. So it sounds like a really cool. Does the mayor or someone else ring a bell to kick off Cider Week?
Oh, we're not there yet. We're not there yet, but yeah, we've still had some great events. We usually have it's going to start off with the Philly Cider Fest, which is held at the historic houses of Fairmount Park. So that first weekend leading up to, so it'd be I guess the 19th and 20th without a calendar in front of me, would be kind of the official kickoff 2-day cider festival at Lemon Mansion in Fairmount Park. And continuing throughout that week. And yeah, we'd love to get the mayor's office involved. If someone has a connection there, please send them our way. It sounds like a great way to formalize proceedings for Philly Cider
the beer
Week.
week, I'm pretty sure it was the mayor that it would tap a cask of beer at the kickoff festival. So you got to do some homework then. You got to ask someone else a question. You got to ask Jonathan a question or Ron.
Sure. I guess we should ask Ron a little bit more about like how many producers, what to expect for his Cider Fest, because that's also coming up, not in 1 month, but I believe that was middle or end of November. Could you remind me what's on what's on tap rather for the Connecticut Cider Festival, Ron?
Yeah, it's November 23rd. All Connecticut producers are invited, and we're getting a lot of out of state. It's basically anyone that's distributing in Connecticut, we're going to have pouring. We did one before COVID, sold out in 3 hours. We had 400 people. We had 30 producers. Each had like 4 or 5 ciders. So it was pretty crazy. It's a lot of fun.
How long have you been working on it, Ron?
2 days. No, I mean a couple weeks.
Well, you know everybody. You really do it. A shout out for Ron. Also, I host some of the events called Cider Feast, and we also do a couple up in New England. And Ron was a big part of making so many introductions. So thank you so much. Especially with
Jimmy, I'm looking at this. I downloaded. I was a little distracted during the show. I downloaded that New York cider app, and I see some cider feasts in there too. The app is really great. You should download it.
How do you get the app?
Apple. Well, I'm an Apple person. I love Apple.
Yeah, you can just literally search for it in the App Store on your iPhone, or if you're an Android user, it's on Google Play.
What is the app, Scott?
New York Cider. Just called New York Cider.
Wow,
yep.
That's really cool. And last question, Jonathan. Somebody's got a question for Jonathan, because I know you know everything.
Not true, but I have one for Ben.
Okay, you do that.
Okay.
I went to school in Erie for a little while, and man, it was impossible to find a beer after 9 o'clock anywhere. So if you had one thing you could change with, being in such a controlled state as you are, like Pennsylvania, what's one thing you could change?
Well, the first and immediate answer for anyone involved in the alcohol industry in Pennsylvania would be the privatization of the abolishment of the PLCB and the privatization of the industry, because it's a real stifling thing. And honestly, I mean, we have our own issues with LCB as a producer and as a manufacturer of alcohol in this state. But, the bars and restaurants that we serve to, if you're unfamiliar with some of the laws, and I'm sure a lot of folks are, they really are kind of, purchasing a lot of their wine, for example, and spirits for their restaurants at what amounts to something pretty darn close to a retail price. And they're also limited in what they're able to serve, because it has to go through the state. And all the consumers purchase the alcohol through the state. And it's PLCB, I believe, is the single largest purchaser in terms of an entity of alcohol, at least in the United States, if not beyond. So certainly that would be the first and easiest answer, would be the about destruction and privatization of alcohol in Pennsylvania is something that is long overdue here in Pennsylvania, and it would benefit consumers and bar and restaurant owners and those of us in the manufacturing part of the industry. And there's some really good people that work at PLCB. I'm not gonna I understand that part, but it is so antiquated and is such a broken system. And there's a couple class action lawsuits and lawsuits that are being settled right now that could end up in some sweeping changes that we hope might someday lead to privatization. So,
but Ben,
we can keep our fingers crossed.
You don't feel like you're putting yourself out on a limb? I mean, this is like a light conversation that you guys are having in the industry, or is this radical talk?
I have no reservation in as far as this is concerned. It really is stifling. It's holding back the food and beverage industry across the state, and privatization would be the first and most effective way to make Pennsylvania a better destination for dining and food and beverage, whether it's at your neighborhood corner bar or whether it's at the finest restaurants in our state. All of them would benefit equally from the privatization and essentially the dissolvement of the PLCB.
Well, it's election night, so is anyone running on this campaign? Is this something that they talk about, or no?
No, there's
talking about.
Unfortunately, it was a conversation that had started and was getting some traction. I think in like the 2010s, and it really hasn't been a topic of conversation with any real push behind it for quite a while. But obviously there's a lot of it is a complex issue, and I'm not trying to make light of it. Like I said, there's a lot of wonderful people. Some of them are my friends that work at PLCB. But at the same time, it's not a system that is serving the people who work in the industry or the consumers well at all. It's serving neither of them well. I really don't know anyone in our industry who would differ with my opinion in this way. So I do feel pretty confident in putting that forward as the first and best way to modernize and really improve the legislative environment for producers, consumers, and publicans and tavern owners here in our state. It would be a godsend, but I don't have a lot of confidence of it happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should end the show with saying cheers to New York State.
We'll do. I'll give a big shout out, Ben. You raised such a good point. I mean, I think we all face these issues across the country, and we know this, right? We've had these conversations with our colleagues in other places in the country, and a big game changer for us, and a big reason why the direct-to-consumer law got passed was because we got a new commissioner of the State Liquor Authority, and certainly nothing against and full respect to the old crew, but this new leadership that she brings, she specifically has said like it really is about trying to provide for the consumer and answer the consumer's desires, as well as helping small business and small craft beverage spaces thrive in a very nuanced landscape. I mean, the whole entire world has shifted dramatically, especially in the craft beverage space. People are consuming different, they order differently, they behave differently since the pandemic. And so it really is, it really is all this legacy stuff that we work so hard against that we're having to deal with. And we've been really fortunate to have Commissioner Fan support us in our work with that direct to consumer shipping. And I think, Jonathan and I met with her really early on this year, and she's just been a big supporter all along the way. And that's very refreshing to have folks in that space be so aware and understanding of what our needs are at the ground level and what the consumer needs are as well. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Cheers to New York. And before we wrap up, Scott, update on Cider Week New York, and it's becoming something else next year.
Well, so we have our Cider Week this year. It's October 5th through the 13th. And you can check out Cider Week New York cidercast.com for any information, or always newyorkcider.org for any information. We are going to be announcing some adjustments for next year. We're excited about. We're not quite ready, but stay tuned to newyorkcider.org for more, and to all of our social channels. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll keep you posted. But we're super excited about this year's New York. And Jimmy will be at your event, loud and proud, on that Saturday, October 5th, to kick things off. We're excited about it.
Thank you so much.
Cider Feast.
And that also will have the New York producers as well as out of state and from other countries. So looking forward to it, as well as food. So we always have food and drink at Cider Feast. Jonathan, anything coming up during Cider Week out at your spot?
Nothing too crazy at this point in time. No, we're just kind of doing the same old, but I'm trying to get down there for Cider Feast. Come see you.
You should come down, bring some steampunk. That would be fun. And Ron, last thing, what's the date again of the Connecticut Cider Fest?
November 23rd.
That's going to be great, man. And I heard you're coming to Cider Feast in New York too, right?
I'm trying. You're trying to get to both.
Listen, you've always been a standout, and you got to try Spoken Spine. If you don't know Ron Sansone, aka Drinking Cider on Instagram, he's really. I think you've helped a lot of people, and you've taught a lot of people. You've definitely helped me meet people, and you're always my go-to guest. So I really appreciate you came on. And then Ben Wink, great to finally get to talk to you, man. You're a wealth of knowledge. So thanks again for joining us. Okay. So much more to talk about with all these folks. Keep up with them. Once again, we got Ben, Jonathan, Ron, and Scott. Thanks for joining me here on Heritage Radio Network. Shout out to our engineer, Armin Spengen. I'm Jimmy Carboni. We'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you. Woo! Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.